Alright, new place, new video. I'm already dealing with a leaky basement, so this has been a lot of fun. And I thought, while working on some other stuff, I would just do something nice and easy while I'm dealing with all that this weekend. So today we're looking at a RPG post that I found kind of interesting, mostly because it feels like a lot of the RPG posts you'll see, it often can be told like, oh yeah, there's one person here who's not telling you the entire story, and it feels very much like the other side is completely demonized, and it's so clear that, like, you know, you're not getting the full story. And we're not getting the full story here either, but it does give us enough information to show that, like, there's a lot of miscommunication and a lot of mistakes made from several different sides. So I will read out that post now in a little bit. This is not going to be one of those really lazy, annoying YouTube videos where people just read a Reddit post and that's it. We're going to read through this and we're going to break down and sort of just talk about some of the mistakes, talk about it on a social level and also on an actual D&D level. With that said, I don't know these people, none of us do, so I'm not going to be trying to infer anything or, you know, psychoanalyze too much between different relationships. We only have one slice of one POV here, and that's not enough to go off of, you know, a whole thing that people love doing online, which is just speaking with authority about, you know, people they do not know with information they do not have. So, let's get into it. Oh, and right before, there might be a slight echo in here. I don't have all the soundproofing foam up yet in the new office, so I do apologize for that, but hopefully the sound isn't too horrid. So this was posted 5 days ago by Cowardly Brave. The title is, "After 7 years DMing, I never felt so angry and disappointed at my players like this before." And it reads, "Sorry, this is a long post, a rant, and I really need to vent somewhere where people would understand how I'm feeling. I don't want to sound full of myself, but I take pride in my campaigns and world building for my table. I have a lot of free time, so I tend to overbuild even basic things, but my players really appreciate this and are always eager to explore more of my setting. I have a campaign that's been running for over 3 years, and it's nearing its end. Some new players have joined the story, one who was a player long ago and took a hiatus after becoming a father, let's call him Islo. And another, a friend of mine who played in other campaigns with me, let's call her Malus. There are already established party members from this 3-year campaign: Vector, Kenryu, Balder, Parzival, and Kaori. Islo is a druid of dreams and a fortune teller. He reads Taroka cards from a custom deck I gave him, which grants him some bonuses or debuffs. Malus is a rogue mercenary, a killer for hire type, who is surprisingly chill for an assassin. We'll see about that. Vector hired Islo to find his lost son through scrying, while Balder was talking to Malus about helping him kill a rival who kidnapped his father. Everything was going great, and the introduction was going smoothly. Until it wasn't. After the scrying and some really cool roleplay between Islo and Vector, where they questioned each other about their families and both characters opened up, Islo demanded payment for his services since it cost him to perform the ritual. Vector didn't pay him, being too anxious about seeing his son. So far, it was just roleplay and they were going to discuss payment later. Meanwhile, Malus agreed to help Balder, but since he was short on cash, he promised that his friends would pay her for the job. Malus and Islo had already met and worked as partners on another job. When Malus arrived at their camp with Balder, he and the party started discussing the lore of the campaign in character, with both Malus and Islo present, listening to the secret plans about killing the rival and other shenanigans which were supposed to be secret. Then, Malus asked to negotiate terms and payment, but Kenryu refused to pay, saying she should do the job for free because she knew too much. At the time, I didn't intervene because it was all roleplay and I really thought they would work it out. But then, things escalated quickly and got out of control. Malus said she wouldn't work for free, and while she knew too much, they just had to deal with it. Kenryu then suggested that they kill her so she wouldn't know anything. That's when I realized I had to step in or things would go downhill fast. I told Balder's player that these threats weren't meant for each other but for their rival, because in a kidnapping situation, every second counts. Balder then decided that every second counts, but not every penny, and called Malus a bitch for asking for payment during a hostage situation. I suspended the session and confronted them saying, "What the fuck are you guys doing? 2 people want to play, and you're reacting like this? What the hell's wrong with you?" Then they said those infamous words that haunt me: "This is what our characters would do." I swear to God, as soon as I heard those words, I wanted to rip my GM notebook to shreds. I immediately made them realize that they had just called someone a bitch for asking for payment for a job, and had disrespected 2 players and their characters with some anti-game bullshit, and was just spoiling the fun out of the game for them. Both Malus and Icelos players were really uncomfortable, and they even said so after this confrontation. Baldur and Vector's players immediately apologized, but Kenryu didn't. He was adamant that what he was doing was the right way to act, and if I considered what he did disrespectful, then I was wrong and was disregarding his roleplay, character motivations, and character agency. I suspended the session, told him to think about what he'd done and said, and disconnected him immediately from the voice chat. Everyone else apologized, and after my anger subsided, I felt ashamed for letting this happen. I apologized to Malus and Icelos players for what occurred, but they told me it should be me saying sorry. As of writing this, Kenryu's player has yet to reach out to anyone. I'm so angry and disappointed because they've never acted like this before. They were always friendly and receptive, and this completely caught me off guard. What the hell do I do now? So there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of mistakes that seem to have been made from several parties here throughout this going on. I'm going to start with the social stuff first, just the stuff we have here about the more friend group aspect, and then we'll talk about the D&D stuff after. And there's only really like two things I want to mention off the bat. Firstly is the term bitch being used, which even if that was in character, it is said like it was in character. That is a term that you have to be carefully using. It is a gendered term. It's a term that a lot of people do not appreciate, and it's not completely clear how much that might have, changed the tone or thrown things off, but it also seems like the player Malus goes by she, her, so also aiming that word at somebody who goes by that could be seen as a bit of an issue from that player, obviously, and, for very good reasons. Now, that's not me saying you can't use that word. That's not me saying that nobody should ever, under any circumstance, ever use that word. Not what I'm saying. But it is just a term that before you use it, you kind of have to be careful. And if you do use it, you got to make sure that whoever you're using it with is okay with it being in character, being whatever it is. But it is one of those things that, you don't want to just throw out there. And it doesn't seem like that was what, sparked everything and made, everything go downhill and, really terrible or anything like that. It's just something that was brought up enough times that makes me think, okay, well, this clearly seemed like it wasn't, received very well. And so I think that's just something that even if you are playing in character, this is what safety tools are for, or just, talking beforehand, or just trying to use a different term that just works just as well, fucking asshole or whatever it might be that, works in the situation. Again, you can use the word if you want. This is not me stopping away from using it. It's just something that you did be careful for. There are just words that, are triggering for some people. So that was one thing where I was like, I couldn't really tell how much that might have really changed the tone, made things a little bit more like hostile of like, whoa, okay, that's a bit of a harsh term to be using here. I know it's meant to be in character to my character, but because there's an argument here and maybe, they don't know each other that well, was that aimed at my character, but also kind of aimed at me as a player. And that might have led to, some escalating of tensions. The other one, and this one just seems insane between people who know each other. I completely get doing this if you did a online pickup game and you don't know the person and, they're going off and they're, acting crazy, fucking saying slurs. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing stuff that's like really disruptive. But the disconnecting of the Kenryu character, that seemed super insane. That's not really how you deal with disagreement whatsoever, especially with something that you've known for at least 3 years here, according to this post. If you're getting into an argument with somebody, or there's disagreement or whatever, and you realize that you want to no longer be having that argument or disagreement, you are fully within your right to just shut that shit down and go, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. I'm out. And then you disconnect yourself or you leave or whatever, or you just mute yourself and you're not responding. Whatever way you want to deal with that, is up to you. But having a little bit of a power trip and going, you think about what you did and then you disconnect them, the level of patronizing in that action makes me not at all surprised that the Kenryu player has not reached out to anybody. Because I can tell you right now, if I've been playing with people for a few years and I don't know how close these guys are as friends, they might just be, D&D friends, where they only really show up to play D&D and that's it. Then they don't really, talk outside of, maybe some Discord messages or whatever else. But if I was part of a group and that's how I was treated, I would probably still communicate, but I would completely understand why somebody would go, man, fuck all of you guys. This is insane behavior to be doing to somebody as adults when dealing with disagreements. You just don't do that. That sort of, I'm not going to use the word silencing because I think that's a little bit, further in terms of what that means for this. But at least in terms of really rudely cutting off somebody's ability to communicate, while allowing everybody else to stick around. I don't know. I'm not surprised that they're not gonna come back and talk and, try and figure out or apologize to you, because if you did that, you owe them an apology as much as they owe you an apology, which we'll also get into how much they actually do owe one. Again, we only have so much information here. I'll be repeating that over and over again because I really don't want to get any kind of tone of authority like I know it's happening here, because we don't know. So yeah, that insane choice out of the way on the GM part, let's talk about the actual game itself, the actual, fun stuff, and less the, psychoanalyzing of the social faux pas that happened here. But I do think that a lot of times, for the most part, the advice for a lot of these posts, and the reason why I don't really do videos like this usually, is that the only real answer to a lot of this is just talk to your players. But there's no things that broke down here that could have been avoided that I think it's interesting to talk about. A lot of them are just kind of like, my friends and I got into a fight, and how should we deal with this? And it's like, I don't know, man, fucking talk to your friend. Be like, I'm sorry, and then move on and go play your game. There's not much else to do. But here we have quite a few things that happened, and so, but this is not even just a D&D thing. Using a gendered insult that, triggers some people, and also being super patronizing to one person that you don't agree with, those are things that are outside the D&D realm. They're like, you got to figure out how you treat people and how you deal with things in all sort of aspects of life, and D&D is a pretty good little place to learn how to act properly with people. So the way this is really positioned and worded is that it really feels like it's hostile towards the legacy players and much more lenient towards the newer players. And I think the reason for that is fair, because I don't think the legacy players did the best job, but I think they did a better job than the new players trying to actually induct new people into this group. And this is a total tangent. This is a weird thing I've noticed people online. I'm not sure if everybody was there for that game. I'm not sure if this is like an open table game with a bunch of people who just show up whenever they can or whatever. But according to this, there's already 5 people, and you're bringing in 2 more for a total of 7. I'm really good at math. I don't know if you guys know that. That's so many fucking people. That's a huge party. I'm already in the camp that I think 5 people is too much, because a whole other reasons, that's probably its own thing. But I think overall, the perfect number for me is 3 to 4. Everybody has their own thing. They have their own interest of how many people they like to have and what they can handle. Everybody might have their own ways of doing things, but every time I've ever run or been in a game that has more than 5 people, it has almost always been one of the worst games I've ever had to be a part of. Either it was actually just terrible and not fun, or it could have been really, really good, or it was fine, but it was brought down by the fact that we had so many different people who were there. Whether you had people who were not really paying attention, whether you had people who were hogging up the limelight, and there was just so many people who were, getting bored, or whatever else. There's too many people for one GM to handle, and the type of game you're running like this, which is clearly 5e, because they say Drew to Dreams, so I can tell that this is D&D. So if you're running D&D, that's also a fairly crunchy game with long combat and lots of different choices for, character builds and whatever else. That's a lot of work to be dealing with when you're running with that many people. If you're doing a much more collaborative, like GM-less game, I think you can do bigger groups without too much trouble, and also, just less rules, easier onboarding, and just less hassle in general, which is not me smacking down 5e. I'd say the same fucking thing about Shadow the Demon Lord or Lancer or whatever. It's like, if you have these games that have a lot more rules, a lot more things, smaller groups are better for those things. So this has nothing really to do with anything I'm talking about. That's just something I did notice, where it's like, that already can lead to a lot of problems that you might want to try and avoid, and just stick to a smaller group. If you have a really big group of friends who want to play, get somebody else to also be a GM and be like, all right, guys, let's do like either an open table kind of thing where we just have one world where we all play together, but we have our own groups, and maybe we just mix and match, or we're going on 2 separate campaigns, everybody still gets to play, and then we also have just better games. But anyway, that's besides the point. So back to the problem at hand here. One of the biggest issues I find with D&D and how D&D is run, and this is what a lot of people are usually trying to say when they say, like, you should play different games or change the culture or whatever of your game that you're playing with when it comes to D&D. Some people give you terrible examples of complete wacko games that you would never want to play in the first place, and I don't know why they suggest those to you and they say you should play something else. But a lot of the time when somebody's saying, like, oh, like, you should play this game instead if you want this kind of vibe or theme, whatever else, is that there's this really weird part of the D&D culture that is everybody is allowed in terms of archetypes. Obviously, everybody should be allowed in terms of diversity. I don't want to get that mixed up at all. Obviously, everybody's allowed in that way. But there's this idea of, I'm going to run a D&D campaign. And the D&D campaign is kind of just whatever. You know, you might be like, yeah, we're doing, usual D&D, kitchen sink fantasy. Everybody's allowed to join. And that's what you say, but you might actually have a very specific style in mind. Now, oftentimes I do think that some people go like, oh, we're doing an evil campaign, so make evil characters. And that's like one of the only times I feel like that paradigm gets shifted so that there is a caveat on there. But there's a lot of times where, with the exception of just really terrible characters that don't fit the world that you're doing, there's a level of like, I can't tell people that they can't bring these characters in because it's a D&D campaign. Everybody should be allowed. It fucks with their player agency, even though it doesn't, to sort of, slice away some of their choices in terms of what characters they can bring to the table. And I think this is a really good example of that, and one of the reasons why there's a problem here. Now, this comes with the caveat of all these things, where it's like, it's completely dependent on context and the people. Yes, there are really good role players or people who are really good at the metagame sort of, social contract, who are able to work with anything. That's absolutely true. But a lot of the problems you do see, at least online, are people who weren't able to make that work. And what I mean by that is, right now we have whatever's happening in the story. We have somebody who lost their son and somebody who had their father kidnapped by a rival. So those are people who have very character motivated stakes that they are driving the story in some way or another, like through them. They have what are very altruistic ones. You can argue how selfish it is to save somebody you love. That's a whole other philosophical debate. But they're clearly doing, good things. They're doing good things for people that they love and people that they're trying to, help out and do whatever, alongside whatever other stuff that they have been doing. When you bring in somebody who is a rogue mercenary, killer for hire assassin, that might not fit super well if the characters who are focused on this and have a certain personality or are seen a certain way aren't going to be very receptive to that character trying to exploit or extort them. Now, I will say, somebody who wants to be paid for their job should be paid. This has nothing to do with D&D. If you do work, get fucking paid for it. Do not let people screw you over. Fucking get your money. Get that bag. But in this case, it does feel like there was some sort of breakdown of communication. We don't have all the details. We don't know how extensive the roleplay was. We don't know how extensive things got hostile or what compromises were actually made, because again, we are getting a truncated version of the events, and we're also getting somebody who is dealing with all these different people talking, and they might miss some things that were being said. Tea break. So them asking for payment for this job, nothing wrong with that inherently. But when it comes to what feels like the legacy players trying to do things to sort of bring them into the party, when they bring them to the camp and they start telling them, all these secrets and all these behind the scene plans and all these things that if the two characters they were talking to were NPCs, they would never tell them that in a million years. That is them metagaming, and this is what is good metagaming. This is just what metagaming is. It's not just making crazy builds, but this is metagaming. It's like, yeah, okay, these two are PCs. We're going to tell you guys things that we probably wouldn't tell anybody else because we're both trying to hire you, but also we're trying to, we're trying to bring you in. Like, we're trying to bring you into the campaign, give you some context. You're not just, like, floating around having no idea why anything's happening. That, to me, is very good roleplay, and it feels very welcoming from the characters. So when that happens, and then the killer for hire assassin is going, all right, cool, thanks for telling me all your secrets, idiots. Now you better fucking pay me, and you're just gonna fucking deal with it. And I don't think the response is immediately from the Kenryu character to go, all right, let's kill you then. If you're not gonna work with us, then we're just gonna kill you. And so I don't think that's obviously the best response. However, it is unclear if that is the first thing that they jump to. I still think it's weird that payment was such a big deal because, I don't know, man. In D&D, because of all your powers that you kind of get from levels and everything else, and you're not doing, gold for XP, which they might be, but I'm assuming it's milestones or monster killing XP. Gold doesn't really fucking matter. Gold can be great as just a roleplay thing that you follow, because you're like, all right, I don't really know what to do with my character. I'm playing mercenary. I'll just be like, yeah, give me gold and we're good to go. I don't really need much, even if you don't need that gold. So I'm sure the party who's been playing for 3 years has gold. I don't know why it wasn't just easy enough to go, all right, here's your gold. And I don't know what happened in the last part of the campaign, so maybe they had no money, or maybe they just didn't want to give it up for whatever reason. But the fact still stands that they were trying to bring them in on a meta level, and then we're still being met with, I'm not doing shit till you pay me. When I think the better response is, all right, how about this? Can we discuss payment after the job then? Or, whatever. Or like, okay, well, we know your secrets now. We're going to help you out here, but I do expect to get paid. If you can't pay me now, you will pay me later. I will follow up on that. And then that's the end of that discussion. You could just do that. And then it's like, yeah, all right, we found, a good compromise. You will pay me. Sure, you are doing the job first, but like, this is just meant for us as a D&D group to work together, for our characters to have a bond in some way through play and through whatever we're doing, and then, kind of move that stuff along. But when it's being sort of stonewalled every moment of like, no, I want money and I want money now, or, I'm making sure that like I have my hands on some part of the money before I help you, or whatever it is, it doesn't seem like the new player, and I'm going to say new player because the Islo characters seem to be decently trying to get themselves in, but it doesn't seem like the new player Malus was doing a very good job of making themselves inducted into the group at all. And so I think that's where the real issue happened. I'm not blaming it all on Malus because, again, I don't think a character going, no, you're going to have to deal with it and I still want this thing, and then your immediate response is, all right, I'm going to kill you then. Like, I'm not going to say murder hobo. I'm just going to say that's a little bit of an overreaction and doesn't provide necessarily much wiggle room. You could say out a character in the moment, like, okay, by the way, guys, like, obviously, I'm not going to kill you, or maybe you will. But you have that thing where it's like, okay, like, I'm just doing this for the dramatic moment we're going for here, but I'm not actually going to kill you or try to or anything like that. And that might lower the tension of like, okay, so we are still, talking and discussing, and we aren't going into combat. But the other thing too with this is that if they do want to kill somebody because they told them all their secrets because they trusted them or, wanted them to trust them and then they were screwed over for it, PvP is not an inherently bad thing. I don't think the Kenryu character is a bad role player for going like, I fucking told you everything. Like we have to kill you if you're gonna just know all our secrets and plans and then you just run off out of here. Like, we do need to do something about you because you are going to be a problem. So I don't think it's bad role play to go down that route. When you trying to be nice to them, or at least whatever, try and bring them in, was met with such a sort of extortionist kind of attitude. So I do understand that. And getting into the roleplay aspect, I think the next part is hand in hand with that, which is where the GM got triggered, and I don't mean triggered in like that fucking like sort of like, oh, you got fucking triggered. I mean like in the literal sense. Yeah, no, you got triggered. They said this is what our characters would do, and you immediately fucking lost it. You say so yourself here. I swear to God, as soon as I heard those words, I want to rip my GM notebook to shreds. And I immediately made them realize that they just called someone a bitch, and et cetera, et cetera. They go into how they just sort of went in on them. I think this will be the most inference I'm going to do on anybody here, because, again, I don't know them. That, to me, sounds like somebody who is on r/RPG, or on Reddit, or Discord, whatever, way too much. There's nothing wrong with a player saying, this is what my character would do. Yes, there are people, and I've dealt with them personally, who will use that as a shield for really shitty behavior. But you can just call out that really shitty behavior, and I don't think this is what was happening. From the information we're given here, I think you heard the phrase in the same way people get really mad about the term metagaming, despite it being a neutral term. But I think that's where things really broke down, because you did that, you got into confrontation, and then you kicked Kenryu out of the voice chat. And I'm like, okay, well, there's not really much coming back from that once that happens, And to go back a little bit, at least just to be fair to the GM, just to back like the more social thing I mentioned earlier, when this did happen, Baldur and Vector's players did immediately apologize, but Kenryu didn't. And I'm going to say this, even if you don't think you're in the right, and this is not even RPG advice, again, even if you don't think you're in the right, unless somebody's being abusive or completely unreasonable, just somebody that you should just get out of the discussion with because there's no point even trying to talk to them. Honestly, the amount of times that if you just apologize right off the bat, even if you don't think you're in the wrong, or if you think that, what they're doing is as bad as what you're doing, the amount of times that I've had those kinds of confrontations in my life, and I just started with the apology or just went in of like, oh, they said this, they're clearly upset, I'm going to say I'm sorry, and then I'm going to mention why I'm upset, or mention whatever's going on that is what I think the problem is here. Almost every time, that has resolved the situation. Not right away, not that there's not still tensions, not that there's still not anger or things to talk about or christens to be, lobbed at each other or anything like that. but almost every time it shows that you're actually willing to both listen and apologize for what you've done wrong, because most of the time when a lot of people get into arguments, it's usually not just one person who did something wrong. Sometimes the way you reacted to what somebody said, or, misunderstood and then immediately assumed you knew, or you both said petty, shitty things or whatever. Starting with the apology might have been enough to calm the GM down here, and then Kenryu might have been able to more easily mention why they thought, what they're doing was right for their character or whatever else and all that sort of stuff. So that's just more advice for life, that if you just apologize off the top, almost every time that will diffuse the person enough to be like, okay, this person's actually trying to listen and is actually trying to apologize. Now, don't go with, I'm sorry you feel that way, because that will not help things usually. But just going like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, that was not my intention. Here's how I feel about this. And you don't have to do therapy talk or anything. I'm just saying, you just mention hey, well, here's my issues with this. I understand I did this or said this, or I think you misunderstood when I did this, and blah, blah, and you can get through it. Usually people are a lot more receptive because egos rise, but a lot of people are willing to put their ego to the side if they feel like the person they're talking to is actually trying to do the same and actually listen to them. So clearly that didn't happen, and I do think that is a fault of Kenryu there, not apologizing when the other two did, and then sort of just doubling down, because I do think that was the end of the conversation there. I still don't think he should have been kicked out the way it was. I still think that was the worst way to handle this. I just think that is going to make things infinitesimally worse. And I haven't looked at the comments or anything like that past what I saw when this was first posted a few days ago, so I don't know if something's been resolved or what. I'm just looking at the one body here. Another tea break. Okay, back to the D&D stuff and less Wasabi's fucking social advice corner. The this is what our characters would do thing is something that really gets people super angry, that the moment somebody says that, they must be antagonizing them. And you know what? From the information here, they might have been. To some extent, we don't know. But from the information given here, I read people who might be a little bit too maybe egotistical or too in their own head of their characters. Maybe there's some sort of social stuff that they were ignoring that they could have brought in more to make this a little bit easier for the new players. But when you have stuff like Islo and Vector's characters both questioning each other, and it seems like, as they said here, both characters opening up, and then you also have them tell the secrets and everything that they wouldn't tell anybody else, and they're only doing this because these are new players. There's a lot of stuff here where it's it does actually feel like they're doing what their characters would do. I do think I need to find another example at some point for maybe a different video of when people use this is what our characters would do in the worst way possible when they're doing the shittiest things. But I really just don't see that here. I just see a lot of people kind of just having a really bad time just agreeing on the simplest thing of just giving coin. Again, I don't know if they were we'll pay you later, because they say oh, my friends will have money, and that might be a thing in character where it's hey, you told me your friends had cash, and now we're here and your friends aren't giving me cash. And I don't know if there's a level of maybe we can pay for stuff later or what. It seems such a petty thing to not just give into on both sides. It seems again, if you've been playing for 3 years, you're probably at least in the mid-tier levels, unless you're doing some crazy stuff. And even if you're not, you get money pretty fast by adventuring and, dungeoneering and whatever else. So unless there's a lot of things here that are not clear as to why they didn't have money, I think they should have either just given money or just come to a thing with Malus here and been okay, listen, just help us with this thing and we'll pay you later. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And that could have been the end of it if Malus had just agreed to that. But I also think them going no, it's my character to want money and whatever else. And this is kind of what I was talking about when I said that earlier, some characters don't really fit all the campaigns or things you're doing. Now, I think this character should have worked. I think if you're going to go for the rival, which seems like they're actually going to go kill the rival for kidnapping the father, it does seem like it should be easy to be hey guys, we found somebody who's not afraid to get her hands dirty. Let's pay her. Let's get her on board and let's fucking do this. That should be the end of it. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record saying, well, we don't know the details, but that's the other part of it that we don't know. But I do kind of understand being you have two characters who are playing themselves as very upset that both their son and father are lost, and right now they don't really feel like negotiating when there is a ticking talk. Jesus Christ, I am a zoomer. Ticking clock, that there is a ticking clock aspect that is, on the line here, at least with the rival, it seems where there's a hostage situation, and it's okay, can we just deal with this? You're gonna get your money, but like we are wasting time talking right now, and we could just really, really use you. And so maybe in that moment, maybe for that time or for that game, bringing in somebody who is that cold and calculating and just, a mercenary isn't the best time. When you could sort of onboard the players being like, listen, here's the story so far. You guys are kind of being dropped into the middle of, a very complex kind of thing of relationships with the main characters and people they need to save. So make characters who will want to help save them. And I don't think you're stepping on anybody's player agency by asking that very simple ask of making a character that fits for this campaign, at least at this moment. But anyway, that's why I want to talk about this whole thing, because I felt like there's so many aspects on all these different sides that I found it very strange that the GM was so on the side of the new players when it really felt like both sides were not doing the best job just coming to a very simple agreement. And the GM getting really angry, I think, is what sealed the deal on that of just shattering it. And you know what? This might have worked out differently even if the GM got mad. If the GM got mad at the new players and the legacy players, been like, all right, guys, why are you guys all fighting over this? It's just money. You guys, just pay them. You, stop asking for so much money right this minute. Do you guys have to do that? Like, can you just come to an agreement and let's just move on? This is such a small thing for this. But I think to come down on the legacy players, I think immediately solidified you guys are in the wrong, and I can absolutely see myself as somebody who does have a bit of an ego getting defensive. I could see myself being like, what the fuck did I do, man? I'm trying. I gave them information about everything we had here. I tried to bring them in. I tried saying, yeah, we'll pay you. I'll pay you later. Or, like, can we come to a deal? Can we talk about this later? I try my best to be like, we don't really have money right now, or whatever reason. Can we deal this later? There's a bit of a fucking timer on right now, and I need to go save my dad, or whatever. And that's why I can't fully demonize the Kenryu character, player, whatever. Because I think they made mistakes, how they communicated, and who knows, maybe they are a huge asshole, I don't fucking know. But from this, it really does feel like, yeah, they made some mistakes. Seems like also everybody else around them also made mistakes, and seems like there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in terms of actually trying to figure out, a good compromise between everybody, instead of just giving in to the new players, which I'm not going to psychoanalyze why the new players are getting such nice treatment, it could just be that this GM was like, I've been GMing for 7 years. I run a mean game. This is going to be awesome. You guys are going to have such a good time. And they ran to this, and then maybe, they felt embarrassed. But I'm not going to go past that thought experiment of why they were so adamantly on the side of the new players. But it is something that I found was like a little bit odd. Tea break. But yeah, a lot of this is going to come down to mostly the social issues that I already brought up. And I think this is probably fucked beyond belief. I don't think there's really much you can do here unless you're able to talk with the Kenryu character and then sort of move on. But outside of that, I think, this is more just a good lesson for anybody who does see this. And I will put the link in the description because there's 280 comments at the time of me recording this. And they are obviously all over the board, everybody calling out everybody. There's all kinds of people. There's some really great takes. There's some of the stupidest takes I've ever seen, but that's the internet for you, and especially Reddit for you. And to give the due to the GM, because I do know this is a issue a lot of people do deal with. It is good to know that if you are trying to do that, this is what our characters would do, this is what my character would do, whatever, or I'm going to fall back on that. Try and think about why you're doing that. Because you might think you are justified, and you might be justified. But sometimes being justified isn't always, the right thing. It might be like, yeah, no, your character would do this. It makes total sense. I've seen your character for the last 2 years, and everything you are doing right now absolutely makes sense. However, it is also causing a shitload of issues because this character is very antisocial, or is making some pretty harsh decisions, or doing any number of things where it's like, can we find a compromise where we still do some of the things you're doing here, but also, bring in new people, or don't completely make the other character go like, well, I have to kill you now because my character would do that because what you're doing is unhinged, or, not all we agreed to. Whatever it might be, because that response is not a bad response and it makes sense, and there's a lot of things where that is sometimes just the truth. It's like, yeah, it is what I would do. But you need to balance in these games what your character would do and what works best for the game, for the group. If you guys like PvP, I love PvP. I think PvP is a fantastic aspect of D&D, but you need to make sure everybody's on board with that. I think that's something that, like, not everybody's going to be. Some people are cool. Some people will be fine with this. I would be fine with this. If I was being a huge asshole to the legacy players, and one of them's like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to kill you now. I would be like, all right, let's fucking do this. Let's get into a fight. If I kill you, that might end really badly for, you know, this campaign or whatever, especially if you're a character who's integral to whatever's going on or whatever. But I don't have an issue with that personally, but you can't just jump into that. You do need to talk about those things. And that is one of the main comments you'll see in this Reddit thread, is that people are like, this is why you should have had a Session 0 again with the new players and all sort of stuff. And I do agree with that. I do think, you know, sitting back down and going like, all right, guys, so here's the story so far. Here's what's happening. This is kind of the tone, the themes, whatever else. And what are things that you're cool with? Because I think one problem, too, with Session 0 is that a lot of people just think it's just lore dumping and then just character creation or, you know, just saying some themes or whatever. You do also have to talk about the things that you're interested in, because I have been in situations where PvP seems like it's going to be on the table, and you have people who get actively nervous. There's a lot of people really do not like competitive aspects. There's a reason why they're playing a game where, for the most part, everybody's kind of together on the same side. They might get into an argument, but overall, at the end of the day, they're going to, you know, still be on the same side and move through. So you do need to be careful with that stuff. It goes into what I was saying earlier about, you know, we kind of assume every archetype's allowed, everything allowed, whatever. It's kitchen sink fantasy, so we can do whatever we want here. But it doesn't have to just be, you know, super horrid topics like sexual assault that somebody might not be interested in doing to make the game get really sour. There's other stuff that could happen, like PvP or certain aspects that you're not aware of. Because it feels like from here, and we're getting, you know, the post-mortem kind of thing of it, so it's hard to know if this is how it felt in the moment. It feels like people here have different ideas of what kind of games they want to run. It seems like Ken Ryu's fine trying to kill a player. We don't know if he's going to actually kill that character or not. He might have just been saying it, but we know he's okay with it. And that's where it seems like the GM kind of freaked out, where it's like, okay, wait, that might get into player agency territory where it's like, all right, you're doing something I don't like. I'm going to stop the game right now and go, we're not doing that. And I think that's fine. If you're uncomfortable with that, or if that's something that you don't really want to deal with, I don't think there's any issue with you shutting that shit down. But I do think that if you didn't discuss that, I might feel a little bit screwed over, where I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, I was making decisions here. Like, we could have talked about this. You could have mentioned that you didn't want to deal with this sort of stuff, but because we don't really talk about these things, we're just going, we're doing a D&D campaign. You know, people act however they want. And then situations like this happen, where people have different ideas of where things should be going. It seems like the GM wanted everybody to just meld together into the D&D group and just move forward together. Everybody drinking beer and laughing and having fun and just, you know, going on their merry way to the next guy they're going to kill. You know, that seems like what he wanted. But other players had, you know, different ideas of how this was going to work. Some people want a more immersive experience where whatever they say, whatever they're following, is what's going to be happening. When that clearly isn't how this is going to work when you brought PvP to the table. So I feel like there's so much more I can say, but I do feel like if you are interested in that sort of thing, there's many comments of all sorts of different ideas and arguments and all that sort of stuff. So feel free to check out that. I think I've been talking about this long enough now. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear how many people are going to disagree with me and think that Ken Ryu is absolutely, you know, the, as Matt Kola calls them, the Wang Rod, or, you know, the murder hub or whatever. And maybe some people will be on the GM side or the new player sides or whatever. So I'm interested to hear your reasoning for that if you do disagree with me. And if you agree with me, obviously tell me, because I need that. I'm not doing well. But outside of that, thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, I do have a Patreon, and you can get videos a day early. You can vote on some videos. You get a Discord role that, you know, gives you a nice color and a few other things like that. So if you want to support the channel, head over to Patreon. But outside of that, thank you so much for watching. I am, again, sorry if this video is going to be echoey. It's a new place, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So have yourselves a good one, and stay safe out there.